Good morning. My name is Avram Lazar. I'm the CEO of the Forest Products Association of Canada. Over the next few weeks, the federal government will be setting its budget. Finance ministers are meeting in Saskatchewan in the next couple of days. And Canada is facing economic challenges that we have not seen in 2 generations. The decisions that we make over the next couple of weeks as a nation and that the government makes will have a large impact on the well-being of Canadians over the next 10 to 15 years. I've come here to talk about the forest industry and what has to be done to be certain that we set the stage for a successful forest industry for many years to come. The Prime Minister, the Minister of Industry, the opposition have all said something has to be done for the forest industry. And well, they should. 300,000 jobs. Another 750,000 jobs indirectly dependent upon it, and 300 communities across our country depend upon this industry. And if you ask anybody in any of the mills what they want to keep their job. If you ask any community what they want to keep their mill. And we all know that the only way to keep jobs, to keep mills, now and in the long run, is to have competitive businesses, to have world-class businesses. And we all know that the real responsibility for that rests with industry. But governments set the stage. Government creates the business conditions, the hosting conditions. And if government gets it right, we in industry will be able to compete and keep the jobs in Canada. And so we're here today to say to the federal government, it's not spending big, it's spending smart. It's bold economic policies that will keep the jobs in Canada. And we've brought a list. 5 things that the government has to do in the next budget. 5 urgent priorities to ensure that we have world-class business conditions and keep jobs in Canada. 1, ensure that the credit markets work. 2, reform the tax system to create incentives for investment in Canadian mills. 3, invest in tomorrow in research and market development. 4, help the transition to the green economy. And 5, help our workers bridge from now until better conditions in tomorrow. Let me very quickly talk about each of those 5. Credit markets. Healthy, competitive businesses will not survive unless credit markets work. Credit is like oxygen. Liquidity is like oxygen in the marketplace. And even if you have a sound business, a good strategic plan, good customers, if there's no credit, you're going to start gasping for air. This is true of not just the forest industry, but our suppliers, of our customers, and of all of manufacturing. All of manufacturing in Canada needs credit markets that work. We've started this crisis with a financial meltdown, and government has to intervene to ensure that the financial meltdown doesn't turn into an industrial meltdown. 2, taxes. If we change the tax system in 3 simple ways, what we can do is get private sector investment happening now. It's good that the government's thinking of a public sector stimulus, but we should be trying to get private sector money into the economy now too. And the things we are suggesting: refundable tax credits for research, accelerated capital depreciation, and a 5-year look back for lost carry forwards would make a big difference in causing the money to be spent now. Research and development. There are many new products, many new possibilities for the forest industry, and many new markets. We're asking the government to create a market development program and to extend funding for research so that the industry can invest immediately. So this is a stimulus, invest immediately in the types of transformation that will open the doorways to tomorrow. The bioeconomy. The industry now produces enough green fuel to replace 3 nuclear reactors. We can go further and be net exporters of green energy, and we can go further into the green revolution by transforming our mills so that they're not just extracting energy, but also new green biochemicals. We're asking the government to create a research fund in partnership with us to help speed that transformation. And then finally, employment insurance. The current conditions in employment insurance do not adequately support workers as they go through this difficult time, holding on to their jobs when hours are less. We're asking the government to extend the EI work sharing program, which is a bridge between now and tomorrow, but also to look at the rest of employment insurance and ask how can we help workers get through this period. When the federal budget comes out, I'm going to come back with this placard, and you'll notice none of the boxes have ticks in them. And I'm hoping when the federal budget comes out, we'll be able to say tick, tick, tick to each of those things. But let me make it clear that if the government does this, the industry will prosper. We know markets are coming back. We know global demand for our products is going to be at least 3% a year. That's more than the entire production of British Columbia. We have been innovating in the industry. Our productivity has increased more than the Americans and more than the rest of Canadian industry. We have been diversifying our markets. We are Canada's among the top 3 exporters to all the emerging markets. And we have been greening the industry. So we have been doing our part in responding to hard economic conditions, tightening our belts, adapting and changing. And now we're saying, federal government, it's time for you to step up to the plate and improve business conditions. Thank you. Je vais juste répéter en français pour 2 minutes. Mais si vous voulez, Julien, vous pouvez poser cette question en français plus tard. Le secteur forestier a un futur très positif, mais les conditions d'affaires pour les prochains mois, même les prochaines 2 années, seront très difficiles. On peut sauvegarder les postes d'emploi au Canada, mais seulement si le gouvernement fédéral améliore les conditions d'affaires. Si on améliore les conditions de concurrence, on peut sauvegarder les postes ici. Et on exige que le gouvernement fasse seulement 5 choses. Le premier, c'est de s'assurer que les marchés de crédit fonctionnent. Le deuxième, c'est de réformer le secteur, c'est de réformer l'impôt pour encourager l'investissement de l'usine canadienne. Le troisième, c'est de faire des plus grands investissements dans la recherche et le développement des marchés. Le quatrième, c'est d'appuyer la transition de l'industrie à un secteur encore plus vert. Et le cinquième, c'est de réformer l'assurance d'emploi pour aider les ouvriers de rester dans le secteur pendant cette période difficile. Merci. Okay.
Do you have a costing on what your recommendations would amount to?
Certainly, the direct spending part of it, market research, export development, the bioeconomy, would add up to about $600 million over 5 years. And the tax measures actually would be cost neutral because what they involve is the government giving us credits now that would have come later. There'd be an upfront stimulus coming from them of about $300 million, but the only cost to government would be the cost of the money. So the key on the tax measures is these are tax credits that would have come to the industry anyways. We're saying, why wait until the economy is recovered when we're profitable to give us these credits? Give them to us now when you're looking for a stimulus, and you won't have to spend them later. Same thing with accelerated capital depreciation. All over North America and in Europe now, there are small pools of capital that could go to mills in Canada. They could go to mills in the States or Europe or South America. Accelerating capital depreciation will mean that businessmen who are looking for the fastest possible return in these difficult times will choose Canadian mills. And certainly the investment will more than offset any tax costs to the government.
What discussions have you had with finance or with the minister himself?
We've been talking to officials in all departments. We've written a letter with all these things to make certain the Prime Minister has it. Certainly the Finance Minister, the Industry Minister, the Natural Resources Ministers have been briefed. We're certainly choosing to hope they're going to do the right thing.
Beaucoup parlé d'automobile. Avez-vous eu l'impression d'être en reste dans cette crise?
Ben, on doit noter qu'il y a plus d'emplois dans notre secteur qu'il y a dans le secteur de l'automobile et le secteur des banques en combinaison. Et nous ne voulons pas un paquet de choses comme le secteur automobile. Nous sommes capables d'être concurrentiels. Nous avons fait nos investissements dans le futur. Mais on veut que le gouvernement fait plus d'attention sur tous les secteurs de manufacturing et surtout notre secteur.
The auto industry is getting more attention. Is this what do you believe this?
Well, certainly all the press to begin with has been on the automobile industry, and we have more employees in the forest sector than in the automobile sector and the banking sector combined. And we're certainly saying to the government that creating world-class competitiveness conditions for our industry is going to mean very strong future employment. And certainly all of manufacturing is saying the same thing.
I wonder if you think the government's taking all of this seriously, because when the Prime Minister rearranged his cabinet, he said, I'm putting my all-stars in the economic portfolios. Clement's from Ontario, Flaherty's from Ontario. The Natural Resources Minister is a rookie whose last job was running a $15 million a year business. She's got no forests, got no mines in her riding. Do you really think that the government is taking the forestry business seriously at all?
Well, certainly the Prime Minister and the Minister of Industry have come out recently and said that they're going to act on the forest industry. But the answer is going to be whether or not we can tick off those boxes. So we've been saying for a while that we want the government to act, but we're not looking for gestures. We're not looking for platitudes. We want action. We want all of those 5 things to happen. And I want to make it clear that those are not sufficient. They are what we're looking for in the next budget. If you're talking world-class business conditions, and that's the only thing we should be thinking about, world-class business conditions also include regulatory reform, rethinking how we approach mergers. There are many things beyond those, but those are the 5 things that we want to see in this budget.
Of the mill closures and other losses in the industry could have been avoided over the last several years if these measures had been in place?
Well, I've been head of this association for 6 years. And each time a mill closes, I get MPs calling me saying, Avram, what can we do? And we've always given them the same answer. Create world-class business conditions, and we will maximize the jobs in Canada. So now we've got an economic crisis. Hopefully more people will be listening. The bottom line is there's not enough money in the federal treasury or not enough policy power in the federal government to change what the marketplace is going to do. But there is the capacity. There is the capacity to maximize the jobs we have here. And we have very good prospects. The world's going to need natural resources. Global GDP is going to double in the next 20 years. And what's going to be scarce when that happens, with huge population and economic growth, is going to be natural resources. And who has it? We've got the fiber, the water, the energy, and the know-how. We are the world's most successful forest products exporting nation. We got the resources. We didn't become that by sitting on our hands waiting for government. We've been diversifying, adapting, pulling in our belts, trying to figure out ways to beat the competition. And we're saying to government, we've been doing our part. It's time. It's time the federal government steps up to the plate and improves business conditions. When the dollar was 70 cents, the government could afford to coast on the fact that we had basically working cheap as Canadians. When we were awash in oil money, the government could afford to ignore business conditions. That time is past. If we're going to maintain our standard of living, government has to work now to give us world-class business conditions. And it's industry that will use them to bring us forward. Government can't raise the price of paper. Government can't raise the price of wood, but they can create business conditions in which we can respond to these things.
Create conditions for merger opportunities. It's not on your list, and I know there's a lot of bigger players in your industry that this is the period for natural consolidation. And maybe you could be a bit specific about what is preventing or what changes would you like to see to allow some consolidation in your industry?
Absolutely. Provincial policies have prevented consolidation in the past and left us weaker than we should be. And the Federal Competition Bureau mergers policy has put a chill on mergers. And part of a world-class business climate is the capacity to reach critical weight, where we are competing in global markets where many of our competitors are bigger than the Canadian companies. And I'm not saying that big is necessarily better. You can be small or medium-sized and brilliant, but most of the jobs are going to come from big firms. And so, like I said, these 5 things is what we want to see in the budget: regulatory reform and a change to mergers policy, and rail system that works. Transportation improvements also are part of a world-class business climate.
Au Canada, il y a des pertes dans l'industrie forestière, pendant qu'aux États-Unis, en Europe et en Asie, il y a des gains. Qu'est-ce qu'ils font dans ces secteurs-là ou dans ces régions-là que nous, on ne fait pas ici pour que ça aille mieux?
Mais la réalité est que les marchés ne sont pas bons partout. Ce n'est pas seulement nous autres qui avons des problèmes. Et maintenant, les pays qui étaient nos concurrents les plus difficiles, par exemple le Brésil, la Russie, l'Europe, ont leurs propres problèmes encore plus sévères que les nôtres. Par exemple, le Brésil a maintenant des problèmes de crédit. Toutes leurs plantations dépendent du crédit et maintenant c'est presque impossible d'accroître leur plantation. En Europe, les coûts sont très, très difficiles maintenant, surtout avec leur système de réglementation environnementale et aussi le manque de bois qui vient de la Russie. La Russie a des problèmes d'infrastructure et aussi des problèmes de crédit. Et si on regarde plus en avant, il y aura une grande scarcité de terrain, de place pour l'agriculture, de terrain agriculturel. So maintenant, des pays qui sont les concurrents les plus difficiles vont utiliser leur terrain pour la nourriture et les biofuels. Et ça sera de plus en plus avantageux de faire le forestier ici. Julian?
Is listening to this type of industrial policy questions, because it seems to me the auto sector only started getting attention and got the bailout they've been asking for years, and the help they asked for years, when they were on the verge of collapse. You're not on the verge of collapse yet, from what I understand.
No, and over the last 20 years, what has been the political debate in Canada? How to spend money. Federal, provincial, tax credits here, regional equalization there. Should it go to municipality? Should the services be delivered by the private sector or the public sector? Should it be education or health? We spent 20 years debating in Canada the smartest, most equitable way to divide pie. We spent almost no time in the political and policy culture of our country talking about how to grow pie. And as I said before, when you had the low dollar, governments could ignore it. When you had oil wealth, governments could ignore it. But now is the time when governments have to pay attention to economic policy for the creation of wealth. We need to do both, divide, share, and create wealth. And so there was a bit of a vacuum in Ottawa political culture in terms of the role of government in the economy. And we're saying the role of government in the economy is not to make it all better. Workers, management, industrialists, entrepreneurs have to make it all better. The role of government is to create winning conditions so that we can compete successfully in a global marketplace.
Dans votre liste qu'on voit aujourd'hui, dans la prochaine année, dans les prochains deux ans, qu'est-ce qu'on pourrait observer? Quel impact que ça pourrait avoir?
Mais on ne peut pas prendre pour acquis, on ne peut pas penser qu'on peut sauvegarder ce que nous avons sans l'action du gouvernement. Nous sommes prêts à faire notre responsabilité et on demande, on exige que le gouvernement fasse son part.
Forestry industry is very significant. A very significant part of the economy is Quebec. Quebec has recalled its National Assembly to address the economy in January. What measures can it take to try to help your industry?
One of the key things Quebec has to do is to accept that the forest industry has to be structured to reflect the global marketplace. In the past, when there was less global competition and when the dollar was low, we could afford to have a mill for every town and have the wood processed where it was harvested. Now with global conditions, we have to move to world-class mills, and Quebec has to re-examine its regulatory system to allow the industry the freedom to structure to reflect the marketplace. Quebec has a great future in forestry, but only if the government allows the industrial infrastructure of Quebec to reflect the outside world.
Like then, because one of the problems when you tour with any Quebec leader is they visit those small towns with the mills where things are shut down, and that would you be talking about one big mill instead of many smaller mills for Quebec? Would it be a mill that's totally outside of Quebec?
No, it would mean larger world-class mills in Quebec and jobs that are sustainable. It's far better to have one mill that's world-class who's going to keep its jobs for the next 30 years than what we're seeing now, which is 3 failing mills.
Vous pouvez dire justement aux travailleurs là, qui ont perdu leur emploi, là, il y a seulement qu'en Outaouais, il y en a 1500. Vous parlez, là, il n'y aura pas une reprise avant possiblement 18 mois, 2 ans. Il y a encore des moments difficiles à vivre pour ces travailleurs-là.
C'est certain que c'est très, très dur. Et, dans notre industrie, nous avons l'expérience de comment c'est pénible, comment c'est très, très difficile. Pas seulement de fermer une usine, parce que la plupart du temps, c'est toute la ville qui dépend sur cette usine. Et c'est pour cette raison que nous disons au gouvernement, l'heure d'action est maintenant. Parce que la seule façon de sauvegarder nos usines, c'est que le gouvernement crée des conditions de concurrence qui sont première classe, et avec ça que l'industrie et les ouvriers font ce qui est nécessaire pour sauvegarder notre vie. Il n'y a pas de magic, il n'y a pas de tooth fairy qui va nous sauver. Nous devrons nous adapter aux conditions des marchés globaux. Et dans le passé, c'était seulement l'industrie qui a eu la responsabilité de cette adaptation. Le changement des politiques économiques avait été beaucoup plus lent que le changement des réalités des marchés. Et maintenant, nous disons au gouvernement, nous exige qu'il change les conditions d'affaires pour répondre aux changements dans les conditions économiques globales.
Really low worldwide, especially in the United States, your major market. And it's not going to get any better for several years now. You're talking about consolidation and merger. And you listed that we have now 300,000 jobs in Canada on the forestry sector. Where's the bottom for the forestry sector in terms of jobs? And can any of these measures affect that?
Well, these measures will definitely affect how many jobs we keep. There's no doubt at all that with these measures we'll be able to keep far more jobs than otherwise. And it's true, demand is really low now, but let's look at the United States. Population growth is continuing. They're not going to live in tents, they're going to live in houses, and those houses are going to be built with wood frames. Demand for wood will come back. Let's look globally. Even with a slowdown in the growth rate for China and India and all of Asia, the lowest estimates I've seen for demand for pulp and paper growth is 2% a year. The most common estimate is 3% a year. That's more than the entire output of BC. We will be well positioned to supply that. So one of the reasons why we're putting more emphasis on competitiveness conditions is because we know we can compete. We know there's going to be a marketplace, but we have to get from here to there.
Because this is something that, Jay Myers and the exporters, they got issues with that. You guys do. The fiscal statement contained, the EDC and BDC were going to be the tools to loosen things up. Was what was in the fiscal statement sufficient? And do you get the sense that BDC and EDC are in fact out there responding to your members when they show up and say, give us a loan?
Well, there certainly are the right instruments to use. I'm not certain that their mandates are sufficiently robust for hard economic times like this. And certainly, like the rest of manufacturing, that is our number one most urgent priority, is to make certain credit markets work. If you have a company that has everything right but a loan coming due and they can't find refinancing, even companies that are not increasing their debt, companies that are not losing any more money, companies that are doing fine but they have a debt and they can't get it refinanced, we lose that company. And so getting credit markets working is for us, like it is for all manufacturing, the most urgent priority. There's nothing wrong with the direction stated in the budget. The degree of ambition seemed more modest than circumstances require.
In the last few years, we've seen a lot of small towns get really hard hit by forest products companies, by pulp and paper companies. We've seen the Abitibi-Bowater closure in Donnacona after they'd gotten all the government money saying we will keep this opening. We've seen Lebel-sur-Quévillon where workers have been locked out for a long time. Is it difficult what will it look like if you don't get this from government? And have you lost a certain amount of sympathy in those small communities because of the actions of some of the companies?
Well, if the government doesn't act on these five priorities, and these are, as I said before, the most urgent, but there's other things that has to be done over the next couple of years. If they don't act, it's definite that we will lose more jobs. It's guaranteed, and more towns will lose the only source of employment.
Vous proposez exactement pour libérer davantage de crédits pour vos entreprises?
Mais ça dépend des circonstances. Maintenant, les banques sont assez fortes, mais ils ne sont pas prêts à assumer de nouveaux clients. So, si on veut faire quelque chose de nouveau, c'est presque impossible de trouver des crédits. Mais si votre source de crédit n'est pas tellement une banque, mais une autre source, ces marchés sont presque disparus. So, on veut que les gouvernements utilisent les outils qu'ils ont. Export Development Corporation est une institution très, très efficace, mais on doit réexaminer leur mandat pour s'assurer qu'ils sont capables de répondre à une crise tellement profonde.
And work sharing, is that simply to ease some pain for families and workers, or are your members of your association actually having trouble finding labor because it's moved away from certain areas?
If you'd asked me that 2 years ago, the answer would be, yeah, as soon as we shut down a mill for an hour, they go to the oil sands. Right now, people are having trouble keeping jobs. We are in a different time, and it's to allow the employees to stay working part-time and to share the jobs while we bridge from the current conditions to future conditions. If you're a company and the price of lumber is half of what it costs to produce it, if you run flat out, you're just running out of money. And so you got to slow things down to try and preserve cash, to preserve the company. And you don't want to tell everyone to stay home because they have to pay their mortgages during that time. EI work sharing is a way of allowing everyone to take a little less for a period while we wait for better conditions to return. Certain.
Qu'est-ce que vous proposez au gouvernement québécois dans cette situation?
Maintenant, j'ai fait des propositions pour le gouvernement fédéral. Et si je dois répondre en général, c'est absolument nécessaire qu'ils révisent leur système de réglementation pour la distribution de bois et qu'ils laissent à l'industrie l'opportunité de trouver une structure qui réponde aux exigences de le marché. And I'll say this for the federal government too, because the temptation to step in is often there. Stepping in and trying to keep this mill or that mill just dooms everybody around you. What you have to do is let the industry structure to the marketplace and set world-class business conditions, and we'll keep the jobs here.
What happens to all the loan guarantees that various companies have gotten to keep the mills in the towns where they are right now, or the grants and subsidies?
Well, certainly there are no federal government grants or subsidies to keep mills in.
Quebec, for example, has given some of your members
the provincial association about that. I just don't have any detailed knowledge of it. Okay, je pense que we've done what we've set out to do. Thank you all very much.